Hello, members.
Hello.
Welcome to another Investmentor Podcast. My name is Jacob, and today I am joined by...
Lannister. No, I'm sorry, start again.
My name is Jacob, and today I'm joined by...
John. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you for joining me today, John. We also got Dean behind.
Hello.
The silent talker at the back.
The silent talker.
Who comes in with some real,
some zingers.
Some zingers into this podcast. You don't know, you've never seen his face, but whatever he speaks.
But you can feel his presence.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Have you been, John? What's been going on?
Very good. Yes, very good. What's been going on? A lot of things. Like everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just on the daily grind.
On the daily grind, as always. Work-wise, same thing. Still trying to find properties for our members. Trying to find those value properties. Getting harder and harder.
So it's been getting harder?
It certainly is getting harder, yes.
What's the current, obviously there's a lot of things at the moment with supply and interest rates and all that, but what's one of the biggest factors at the moment that's making it difficult?
In terms of finding the properties, I think vendor expectations, especially when it comes to land. As you know, we're trying to find those brand new properties that we feel is under what the comparable sales are doing, and possibly even under what the current sales on the market are. And it's all about the expectations of the landowners or even the developers. From last year to this year, the reason why last year there was a natural sense of urgency, a lot of people wanted to buy. So the prices there, was selling quite quickly. Today's market, if you compare it to last year's, when you sort of search for those value properties that we think is under, it's harder because from a vendor's perspective, the land is, they've kind of creeped it up from last year. But in reality, it should be staying almost at probably about similar pricing. Just finding those deals like that.
I'm sure this question every single person has asked you, but is it going to go down?
What?
Prices.
What a question, Jacob. Is it going to go down? What a general question as well. What's going to go down? Prices.
Probably prices.
In general?
They got to crash sometime, don't they, John?
Are they?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. What's a crash?
Is
it subjective?
We did a whole video about this, but we went to the public and asked people this. But what is a crash?
What is a crash, and what does it mean? Well, what's a crash mean to you guys?
Well, it'd be where all value is gone and property is valued at nothing, and you can get a house for 50 grand.
I would say that's a crash, right? Anyone else? Dean, what do you think a crash would mean? An actual crash, because crash is a big word. It means it's a collision. Gone. Explosion. Does that mean the property is worthless? Is that what a crash is?
The bubble has popped.
The bubble has burst, like everyone says. If the bubble bursts, does that mean all the prices are halved? Would you say that's a crash?
Well, that's actually a really good point, because the word crash is thrown out all the time.
Yeah.
How would you even define it? What is it?
What is a crash?
Yeah.
So some people might think a crash is properties halve in value. Some might think it's worthless, worth zero, which is highly unlikely. And to other people, it could even mean just a 20% drop. Others 30, 40. So it really depends on how you view what a crash is. Now, you have to form that view in order for you to think for yourself, is it a good time to buy? Because I think it's going to crash. And then you say to yourself, it's going to crash. And in my opinion, it will crash 20%. So to anyone who asks this question, change the question to yourself. That's what I would recommend. Instead of asking someone, do you think it's going to crash? Or any sort of so-called property experts, hey, do you think the market's going to crash? Before you even ask that, ask yourself, what do I think a crash is?
So what do you think a crash is? To you, what's the difference between a correction and a crash in John's head?
A correction and a crash. Well, a correction to me anyway, it's just more the prices aren't continuously rising. Okay, because that doesn't happen. Almost in anything you invest in, nothing is a straight line. There's always going to be ups and downs. So, it's a slowdown of those price growth. Like instead of just keep going like this, it might just go like this and sort of plateau a little bit. That is a correction. And a correction really is there's just the buyer demand becomes a lot less. And that is why the prices don't continuously go up. On the flip side to that though is a lot of people talk about there's going to be less buyers because interest rates are going up, and then that's where the correction is going to happen. But it doesn't necessarily happen that way because you have to counter it with how much actual supply is in the market. So even let's say, for example, you have 100 buyers last year, okay, and you had 50 properties available. So you had more buyers than you do properties. It's 50% more. Now, maybe this year you have 50 buyers, but still 50 properties, right? And that doesn't mean the prices will go down. It just means there's one property per person.
Yes.
So that will be a correction because you're not competing. So the analogy was 100. So that's 2 to every one property. And maybe this year it's 1 property per person, as an example on the demand and supply. Yeah. So correction is it's just not going to continuously rise. A crash is, if you're trying to force me to a number, it's probably about 40% from the value of your property. Now, again, ask yourself the question, if you are currently renting or you currently live in the property that you're living in. Now, let me ask you guys, the place that you live in right now, your place, Jacob, what do you think it's worth?
Ooh.
Just guess. What do you think?
About 3 million?
3 million? And the place you live, even if you're renting, what do you think that place would be worth?
The whole building. Probably.
Not the whole building.
Oh, just my...
Yeah, your unit or whatever.
I don't even know, like 400,000 maybe?
Yours? I'd probably say about
less.
800.
800?
Yeah.
Which suburb do you live in?
Forest Lodge.
Oh, okay.
Small studio apartment, no gas.
Okay, let's just say it's 400.
Yeah.
Whatever. So you say 400 and yours is 3 million. Now, minus 40% on all of those. So, Dean, your one, 400, what's minus 40%? So 10% is 40. 4, 8, 12, 16. 160,000. What's 400 minus 160?
240.
Okay, so remember that number now. 240,000 and yours is 36912, 1.2 million. So what's 3 million minus 1.2?
1.8.
1.8.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is a crash. Now, it doesn't mean that the house is worthless. If you're forcing me a number, you'd probably say about 40%. But realistically, ask yourself, Dean and Jacob, the house you live in, who would sell it now for 1.8? Would you?
No.
Would that owner of yours sell your 400,000 property for 240?
Of course not.
Okay, so when people ask about a crash, to me it's about 40%. Now, everyone watching here, just think about where you're living and just minus 40% of that, and ask yourself, how realistic is it that whether you're living with your parents or living by yourself, will this house be worth X amount minus 40%? And how likely is that? Now, if you want to get even deeper and understand it, go call up your local real estate agent, okay, and ask them, hey, do you think my house, if I sold it on the market, what do you think you would sell it at right now? So if yours is 3 million, go call the agent and ask them, if I put it on the market, what do you think it'll be? They might say, look, it would, and ask them this question. I ask them, like, how quick could you sell at, as a decent price? They might say, look, Jacob, I reckon 2.7. Someone will buy. Dean, for your 400,000, I reckon if you put it 370, 360, someone will buy. Okay, that is worst case scenario. So how is it likely now, if you ask me, to actually crash? That's what I tell people. Like, before you mention all these really dramatic words, just like logically think how that's actually going to happen. So that's just one property, yours and yours. Now imagine a suburb. To be able to, one whole suburb, let's say one suburb has 500 houses in it. To be able for that entire suburb to drop 40%, okay, it will need at least 30% of those 500 properties to have that scenario that I just told you. So imagine one suburb has 500 properties that's all worth $1 million, every single one of them. And it's going to take 30% of those 500. So what's that?
700,000 would be sale, 30% off it, right?
No, 30% of the 500. So it says 500
30%
houses.
of the houses, sorry.
Yeah.
That would be 150.
350.
Yeah.
So 150.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 150 houses in that suburb has to sell at 700,000. And then that suburb will be deemed that's dropped 40%.
Sheesh.
That's the reality I view it at.
But the market's crashing.
So if everyone wants to wait for that crash, that has to happen. So if you're sitting on the fence right now and and a lot of those people who say the market is going to crash want the market to crash.
Yeah, what's the big reason for people saying and thinking that? It's because it's just what they want, or
yeah, I
it's
mean,
a way out. Is it an excuse?
It could be an excuse. It could also be that they can't get in the market. And you know, they're waiting for this so-called crash, and there's a lot of people on the media that really outline this, that the Australian property market is overpriced, it's going to crash 40%, some people are saying 50%, and these people are just waiting for that to happen. But imagine now, if it crashes, let's just say it did, and then all those people rush in. Okay? Now imagine one house crashes 40%, right? How many buyers is going to go there and try to buy it?
Probably sell for more.
A lot of people is going to go there and buy it, and they're going to outbid each other. So it's not going to end up being 40% anyway, because one buyer you might have, let's say a real estate agent. Imagine this. Imagine a real estate agent puts your $3 million properties for 1.8 auction. All right, and they put it on auction. How many people would attend?
Well, yeah,
hundreds would come. Oh my gosh, where do you live again? Epping. You live in Epping in Sydney. Even if that's advertised, Epping, Sydney house, 1.8 million. And then when everyone does this when they find property, they go online, do it themselves, look at what's selling and look at what's sold, and they're going to realize nothing there for the house that you've got is 3 million and this one's 1.8. It's going to spread. You're going to have 100 people at your auction, and then everyone's going to outbid. And then most likely, worst case, it could probably sell for 2.5. Because to a lot of people, that's still a bargain. So how do you even get that at 1.8?
What are your thoughts on auctions in general? Like,
it's a frenzy of emotion. Frenzy. And it's really driven by the own occupier market, people who are wanting to live. Now, fair enough, because going to auction, unless you're a developer and you're trying to buy the site, or there could be a house there that they want to develop, so maybe knock down, build some townhouses or duplex, whatever. Unless you're that, majority is people wanting to live in that suburb for various reasons. It could even be they need to be in the school catchment. They're close to work, or their family lives there. So it doesn't actually become a price property decision. It's just a very much emotional decision. So the auctions are really driven by competition and emotion. That's why auctioneers are really good. They make the best salesmen, auctioneers, because they're playing a lot on people's emotions.
Yeah, it's emotion. It's stress as well, right? Like,
yeah.
it's like a now or never kind of mentality.
Yeah, and you got to be ready. You got to be pre-approved.
Yeah, and it's very easy to, for lack of a better term, manipulate people into buying in that situation because it's so high pressure.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
But there's always a place for these guys anyway, because if all of you guys who one day will own property, you guys, the best way to sell is probably through auction.
To sell, yeah.
To sell.
Yeah.
So it's actually good they're there because once you do have a property and you do want to sell, you want to have them on your side, right? For buyers, not so much. Unless you are one of those people who really want to live in that suburb, and that's fair enough. But a lot of people do end up overpaying. That's why you see on the news, they actually advertise on the news, online newspapers, how good an auction result was. You guys notice that?
Yeah.
This house sold 500,000 above the reserve. And they actually make that a good thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, like, again, from a seller's perspective, that's good.
From a
That's good to
seller's
know,
perspective, that's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what happens there? What happens when that happens? It almost changes the entire suburb. Why? What does a real estate agent do now if it sells 500,000 above the reserve? You were one. You were around real estate agents. What happens?
Yeah, well, like, that's the case now, and then that almost becomes the standard for the suburb, right? Because it's like, well, like, owners around the area will say, oh shit, they got that much for that one.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do the same for us.
Yeah. And it's not even that. It's the agents now will go around flyers.
Yeah, and advertise
emails.
the fact that they got this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll see in your mailbox, hey, the house next door down the street sold 500,000 above. And it makes everyone think that way. Yeah. So then that suburb now, the price ultimately changes. So if it's got 500,000 above the reserve, even if it's 250,000 above the reserve, it's still more than what the vendor was actually asking. So it dramatically changes. That's why when we do a lot of our research, we love to go into highly owned occupier locations because that is a possibility that could happen. Owner occupiers almost drive these prices because of the emotion going into the suburb, which is important. Desirability of the suburb is important. Yeah.
And yes, okay, so I know you've explained this a million times in your webinars and stuff, but maybe for people who haven't heard on the podcast, why is it that a very high owner-occupier location is good for investment? What's the main reason for that?
Well, that's the one reason I just said. Like, highly owner-occupier areas means people want to live there. Okay? Now, think of it the opposite way, Jacob. Imagine Epping, where you live, or Forest Lodge, where you live, Dean. Imagine that it's opposite, where 80% are renters and 20% are owner-occupiers. What is the question you should be asking yourself in that scenario? 80% people rent. So who owns these properties? Investors. Now, why is it that 80% rent and only 20% own and live in it? Ask yourself the suburb itself.
Would it be being able to get good rents there? Like I assume that would be the case for like suburbs very close to the city, right?
Could be.
Like there wouldn't be as many owner occupiers. Right?
Yeah, that could be the case. But it's about desirability. So when you're searching for a place to live, right? And typically a lot of people who look for a house, they go into suburbs because there's a reason they want to live there. And then you ask yourself, why is it that this suburb, like for example, it's Epping, how come this suburb only 20% want to live there? What is up with this suburb that I don't want to actually build my foundation here and live here? Why?
Like, what are factors of a suburb that would make that the case?
So you could say it could be the schools. You could say it's the desirability. You could say you could even say people, demographics. A lot of highly investment-driven areas, when you're talking about the inner city and stuff, that's the young demographic who rent, right? And for you to become a homeowner there, you are surrounded by that type of demographic. That's a possible reason. Another reason, if it's not near the city, where it's sort of the suburbs, where it's highly renters, could be that place itself doesn't have enough amenities for families to live. And they're important for families, which is, like, what do you look for when you're actually living in a place?
Like in the house itself?
Yeah, not the house itself,
like the
but
area.
the suburb. Like, you need to have good transport.
Yeah, transport is
Yeah.
I mean, for people our age, I guess transport's a big
Transport.
one, right?
Now, most owner-occupier locations are family-driven, so it really relies on, does that suburb have desirability for families? Okay, and the reason you want that as well, families have double incomes. When you go to places where there's a lot of single income earners, where that's high volume renters areas, their borrowing is a lot less. So the property prices can't go that much higher because they simply just can't get the borrowing because most of them are single income. When you go to family orientated areas, it's double the income. So they can get more borrowing, they can save double for a deposit as well. Yeah. So back to that point, like schools, transport, close to work, they're factors. The environment of the suburb itself, a lot of people don't maybe realize a lot of families like to go into areas where, it's tree-lined streets. I know it sounds small, but emotionally they do when they drive down that street and it's got nice trees on the street and they've got nice houses. You kind of get attracted and say, oh, I actually want to live around here, that sort of thing. So there are a lot of, they're the sort of emotional factors on owner-occupier locations.
Well, it's all emotion and lifestyle, right?
It's lifestyle, emotion, amenities, the people in the suburb, who lives there. Yeah, a lot of that. Now, another part of that is culturally, we're seeing a lot of pockets around Australia where there's a lot of multiculturalism, where areas are dominated by different cultures. So, for example, in Sydney, you've got areas in the northwest like Box Hill, going up there to Marsden Park. A lot of them are ethnic backgrounds. Now, so what happens is when new migrants come in, they know a lot of like their friends and their families who live here are in those suburbs because they're not familiar with Sydney or Melbourne or whatever. They don't know the area. What is the first thing they do when they come here? It's to go to who they know. And if they're living around there, which a lot of people are now, it's just natural that they're going to end up living there.
So is that the main reason? Because that's something I've always wondered. Maybe it's something we can pull up, maybe an article or something. But so the idea that a lot of suburbs and a lot of areas in Sydney especially get filled with pretty much the same ethnic group.
Yeah.
Is that the main reason?
It's big main reason because when an ethnic group is in an area, they start their own businesses as well, which is towards that ethnic group too. That's why you see different cultural shops, different ethnic shops, restaurants and all that. So it's almost community based now. It's very similar if you go back to the 60s and 70s where even the 50s, where the migrant groups were the Italians, the Greeks, and they all were around the similar areas.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. But even if you split up the suburbs of Sydney, right? So you got the north, the west, south. I'm from the north of Sydney, and yeah, all my family are in the Ryde Marsfield area.
Yeah,
and there's where my grandparents are. Literally every person in the 4 streets surrounding are some family friend or family member, and they're all always together. It's like Little Italy over there.
Yeah, that's right, and that is a factor you got to take in when you look at investment, because remember, new migrants also come here with no preconceived notion of what suburbs are. They're not biased towards any suburb. They're just coming here wanting a new lifestyle and wanting to know people, new friends, and have something, that is familiar.
Yeah.
To them, and that is the rise, and it happens all the time. Like I said, the Greeks and the Italians. So there's so many pockets, like you said, in Sydney where it's predominantly these ethnic backgrounds.
Well, yeah, you look at the inner west, and it's Marrickville, all the Greeks, Leichhardt, all the Italians. Not so much anymore, but that's what it was. Yeah. And
then you've got areas like Strathfield, Burwood, where a lot of the Chinese also migrated towards, and they're all, and that's why a lot of the restaurants and all that. In that sort of culture. Yeah. Yeah. And that actually now becomes its own sort of gentrified area where people get attracted, new migrants get attracted to that. Now, remember as well, new migrants are also coming here on, these days, actually pretty good income straight away. Because the skilled migration is, they're actually bringing in, it's not like everyone can come here. It's like a skills-based system, point system. So when they come here, you know, they're on pretty good income straight away. So they could probably buy a house within 4 years, 3 to 4 years from saving a deposit, right? And where do they go? And they don't have any notion of property prices either. Now, this comes back to, this is a really good segue, interest rates. Now, you know, a lot of people are talking about interest rates. And I say be wary, because interest rates is just part of the game. If you're a serious investor and you want to build a portfolio, you can't be swayed too much. Interest rates up, interest rates down. Now you take it into account when you do your cash flow. That's it. But think about this. You know, we've just been very fortunate in the last 3 years that we've been in a very low interest, 2%, 3%. Now think about a new migrant coming, and the interest rates were 5 and 6% right now, and they come here, right? And it's 5 and 6%. Their natural tendency is to, like most migrants, is to buy their own home, almost regardless of the interest rate. Now they're coming here already in a 5 to 6% environment. That's what they know, right? So they will buy anyway, because they didn't experience a 2%, 3% like we have. So to them, it's like, okay, that's what it is, 5 or 6%. So then they will buy a house based on what they can afford. That's what they'll do. It's not like they will start questioning, oh, the interest rates a year, 2 years ago was 2% or whatever. It's more like, I want to get my home and the interest rate is this. Now they're living in a 5 or 6% environment. Sooner or later, it's going to go down, the interest rates, right? So a lot of these new migrants and a lot of properties are going to be sold to a lot of these new migrants in the next year or two, okay? And to them, this whole interest rate thing is not even really a big issue, because they haven't lived through a 2%, 3%, right? But for us, all the people who keep thinking about interest rates, they're just sitting on the fence going, I'm just waiting for it to drop. But if you wait for it to drop, a whole new set of buyers will come in, not even caring about interest rates.
Yeah.
You know?
What would make it drop?
Interest rates? Well, you're already seeing it starting to drop in the UK.
Oh, they're dropping in the UK?
Yeah, you're already seeing it dropping in the UK. Now, there's so many factors on interest rates dropping, but it's really the RBA that sets that. They set the price of interest, and then the banks almost just follow suit, because, you know, the banks, if they need to borrow money, they borrow through there, and they need to pay them back. So if their interest rates go up, the banks will also go up. So it's almost passed to the customer. Yeah, so what could make it go down? There's so many factors. What they're saying on the news is waiting for inflation to drop. Then they'll consider bringing it down. Yeah.
Okay.
So their goal, the RBA's goal, is just to monitor inflation and try to keep that, and unemployment, right? So they sort of just turn the interest rate thing up or down just to get that, hit those numbers. Yeah, I got a, what did I see that? I think I have it on my computer, but it was a survey done about when people are wanting to buy a property. Basically what it was is people who are wanting to buy 6 months from now, or right now, or wait, whatever. 43% of that survey said they want to buy 6 months from now. 43%, right? Now, just think about that for a second. Imagine 6 months. I know this doesn't happen, but imagine 6 months from now, all of that 43% decided to buy. What happens?
Then the prices go up.
The competition is up again. Everyone is like trying to time this market thing. Remember, I always say, what's in property with a long-term view is it's more important to have time in the market than try to time the market. Because when most people are trying to time the market, they're going to try to all go in at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then that's buyer demand right there. So that's an interesting thing how most people are thinking right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's fascinating. So what's this?
Okay, so APRA, this is from APRA. APRA is the regulator that watches banks and how they're giving loans to people. So they're almost the organization that watches independent of the banks. Okay, now to a lot of people when they say market crash, and you'll see this a lot on the news about people forced selling because interest rates are going up, people can't afford their loans. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, you hear about that. Yeah, but
you hear about people
how real is that?
can't afford their loans, so they have to sell, which is like what they call fire sale. And to a lot of the pro-market crash people, what they say is, you know, a lot of people can't afford their loans, so a lot of properties are going to go on the market. Now, when you look at, this is what we call non-performing share of loans in Australia. So what's a non-performing share? It means non-performance means the people are 3 months in default.
Okay.
So they're defaulted on their loans for 3 months.
So they haven't been able to pay their
They
loan
haven't been
for the
able to
last
pay
3
their loans
months.
for the
Yeah.
last 3 months. That is a non-performing loan. This is as of September. Look at it. This is this month. What is our percentage in Australia of a non-performing loan?
So 0.76% of people with loans
Of every single loan in Australia.
has not been able to pay.
Yeah. That's less than 1%.
Do we have a rough amount of how many loans there are?
Oh.
Wouldn't be able to get that.
Well,
I'd just be interested to know like what that like physical
Well,
number is.
here,
is
we're
percentage.
two. You're talking about the loan amount?
Well, so is that 0.76%?
So let's just work on
people?
the numbers. No, houses or properties.
Oh,
So let's
okay,
say
yeah.
there's a million properties in Australia.
There's about
What's-
10.3 million properties in Australia. 6 million have mortgages.
6 million.
6
have
million.
mortgages. Okay.
So out of that 6 million, what's 0.76 of that?
Let's have a look.
Whatever it is.
Great question.
Let's have a quick look.
Yeah. So whatever that is, that's the actual number. Do you have the other?
Times, was it 6 million?
Do you have the other thing, Dean? Okay. Now this one is 30 to 89 days past the due date.
0.
So past 3 months, way past 3 months. So look at that. That's September 2022.
But mortgage stress,
Everyone's saying mortgage stress. Now you got to look at the real stats. So you tell me. So Dean, if you want to do your calculation, you can, but that's what it is. So until that really significantly goes up, and it has to go up to like 5%.
Wait, so this is going down. So that's still going down there with the rise in interest rates.
With the rise of interest rates. So the rise of interest rate, it's still going down of people who can't pay their loans 30 to 89 days past the due date.
So yeah, so the
So
big
are people
takeaway is
are
that
really people in mortgage stress?
it's not as big an issue as it's
It's
made out
not.
to be, right? Yeah.
And this is probably the toughest environment, which is, 5-6%, maybe 6% interest rates. Even if that goes up a little bit, even 1% of 6 million properties.
Where are people getting this idea that there's mortgage stress?
This is the thing. When people want to put that out on the news, it's clickable.
Yeah.
People don't want to show this. By the way, our mortgage stress of non-performing loans is 0.4%. So Australia's in a healthy position.
Yeah. Everyone says, oh,
and,
okay.
and this source is from APRA, by the way. So, I urge people, when you question things, look at the other perspective. Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Hey, I think I got to go, but I can continue this another time.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for joining me, John. I
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Jacob.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll do another one because this was quite insightful. I always enjoy talking to you about this sort of stuff.
Awesome.
I feel like we chat about this all the time off camera, so I'm like, why not
Yeah.
bring it on?
Anytime, Jacob. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, John.
See you guys.